Hello and welcome again to another one of Raven Wargaming's deck building videos. Today we're going to be looking at my East German deck, and I hope you enjoyed the musical stylings of the Erich Weinert ensemble performing Augen geradeaus, which is a East German marching song about a battalion or a regiment marching through a small town, and they all see a pretty girl looking at them, and they all think she's looking at them in particular, and they all want to catch your eye, but their commandant keeps demanding Augen geradeaus, eyes forward, and so that's please forgive my poor German pronunciation. But anyways, here we are with my East German deck. This is I would say it's one of my favorite decks, really of all time. I played East Germany probably more than any other nation in ALB, that is Air Land Battle, and I haven't played it nearly as much in Red Dragon just because for most of the game they haven't been up to 1995 standards, and only relatively recently did they reach that. And I really started to play them a little bit more since then. I think they do still have some issues with them, certainly price imbalances or just strange availabilities or units, and I'll address that a little bit, but in general I feel this deck is competitive in most games if you choose your terrain and your enemies carefully. And I guess we'll just begin and we'll go through it. Start with my logistics section. You'll see it's a little bit lighter than my usual logistics section, and there's a reason for that. I don't have a supply helicopter. Part of that is because the Mi-8, which is the East German supply helicopter, it isn't all that great. It's only got 1,500 supplies. It is cheap. You can buy them in pairs and get a little bit more bang for your buck, but it's overall not that great. You almost need two of them to fully resupply one of their supply trucks, which is it's a very strange ratio, and I don't really like it. I have had this in my deck for quite a while, but I've found that I have more need for those points elsewhere, so I've taken them out. I do use the heavier German supply truck, but compared to its predecessor, the T813, compared to the T815, they have almost the same supply per point, so really it's just a matter of do you want more at less cost or less with more supplies. So I really toss up there. FOB, self-explanatory. It really lets you get the value out of your supply vehicles if you can run them back to the FOB rather than having to call out another one, and it certainly makes you more popular with your team if you have a FOB on hand for them to resupply from, or if you're just not stealing their supplies. Command units, infantry in Mi-8s. I think for a lot of the minor nations, their availability bonus is so high that they get another command infantry that is 4 instead of 3, and that really does add a lot of value to this card of command infantry. I happen to take them in cheap helicopters, just for the speed with which they can get somewhere. It really wouldn't be wrong to take them in a THMI-8 TV instead of just the regular Mi-8. I might change that. Then you can see also just a light APC command vehicle. They do actually have a really good command tank, the Führer Panzer T-782 K1. 2 top armor, relatively affordable as far as command tanks go. That wouldn't be a bad choice either. You could definitely fit that in your deck if you had a need for it, but I personally I like the command infantry and command APC lineups. That's what I take. Infantry. Now this is one of the very awkward parts of the deck, and I have to admit I'm not really entirely sure what I want to do here. I take the LSTR 40 because they're just very good. They have a workable man pad, but they also have a Vampire, which is the best RPG in the game. Relatively good close combat stats. You see they have an assault rifle, SGG 943. It's got actually SMG rate of fire with assault rifle range and accuracy, so that's not too bad a deal. Actually, I guess it's actually a submachine gun accuracy, but assault rifle range. But anyway, that's pretty nice. They actually fire as well on the move as they do stationary, because their stabilizer is 40%, their accuracy is 40%. Kind of an interesting thing. You can see I do take them in the MI8 TVs, which just has a machine gun and a lot of rockets. I don't really like taking them in Heinz. It gets to be too expensive. It kind of cuts down on their availability, so the MI8's probably the best of both worlds, so to speak. Motor Shoots in 90, these guys are actually really good. Very well priced, very capable. They have a high AP rocket launcher, which unfortunately does have low accuracy. I think they really need to buff the accuracy of the RPG-7 VR to at least 50%. That would go a long way to improving the Eastern Bloc shock infantry, including Spadochronyazha and hvAcza, as well as the Soviet Motostrelki. That'd be a great change to make, but as is, it's okay. They're hardened, they have more accuracy with it than the Motostrelki would, for example. They have this LMG, which is actually pretty good. I mean, it doesn't have the highest rate of fire, but does have very nice accuracy, CQC. It's much better than the RPK that most of Red 4 uses for their infantry, or shock infantry. You see it has just a tiny bit more rate of fire, basically meaningless, but it has 50% more accuracy than and by 50% I mean half of 40% added to 40% is 60%. But I mean that's a real big advantage in DPS. So just for motor shoots to motor shoots at 90, this is a huge upgrade. 10 more AP on your launcher, much better machine gun for only 5 points. And as far as infantry goes, that's kind of where it ends for me in the DDR. Anything beyond that is really almost a waste of a card, and I'll address that in a second. But just covering my transport options really quickly. If you're wondering, by the way, I'm actually using Custard's DDR reskin package. I'll have that linked in the description of the video, and you'll see a lot of cool camos for my vehicles, and I definitely recommend checking it out. I use the BMP-2 with the motor Schutzen because it's armored, has a decent autocannon, high rate of fire, excellent support when pushing through a forest or attacking a city. And you might say, well, why don't you take the BMP, one of the better BMP-2s? So just comparing these, you're paying, sorry, because they're a transport, I can't actually click pin for comparison in the deck builder, but you can see the only difference between these two is that the BMP-2/C is a little slower, and it has a ATGM for 10 more points, and an ATGM is only 3 missiles, kind of poor accuracy. It's really not worth 10 points. It might be worth 5 points, but it's just much better not to have it, I think. You're way overpaying if you take it, so I personally do the BMP-2. And then I have 2 units of motor shoots in the SPW-80. Now, this unit, I should say, this transport is objectively speaking overpriced, because the USSR equivalent, the BTR-80, is only 15 points. And originally they left this at the DDR version at 20 points for reasons unknown. Very poorly articulated, very strange, frankly very stupid, and Flieger, the East German Marshal, has promised that in the upcoming patch they will be reduced to 15 points, so that's good. This really should be 15 points. They actually, you might say, well, why don't you take them in the SPW-70? And obviously that would be very strange once the 80 gets to be 15 points, but right now, yes, they are different in price. And you see, actually the 80 has 10% more accuracy than the SPW-70. That's double the accuracy, and if you think about it, that translates to double the DPS, and I really find the SPW is more reliable. And so, if I'm going to overpay anyways for the SPW-70, I thought, well, what the hell, I'll just get the SPW-80, get around 40 points per motor shoots and squad. Yes, it is too much, frankly, but in the next patch, there'll be 35 points a package with 15-point SPW-80 and 20-point motor shoots, and so I think that's okay. Conqueror's Infantry, I've talked about ATGMs in my previous videos. I don't feel that they're a great value, but about the best you can do in the DDR deck. I mean, their FJB-40 they have a crappy man pad, which is almost useless. They have a RPG, which isn't very good. Not a very solid unit at all. 25 points. And then their man pads in general aren't. I mean, the Igla is okay, but it has slightly nerfed accuracy compared to what Iglas should have. Strela 2 is just absolute crap. It's the blowpipe of Eastern Bloc. Lake Deschutes are they have this low range, low accuracy, low AP launcher. They have one of the worst machine guns in the game, and they're 25 points with only regular train and an army whose line infantry are shock. And that is absolutely ridiculous. This unit, if it was 20 points with shock training, it might be worth it, but it's just not very good. They're extremely overpriced, extremely underperforming, and there's really no reason to take them right now. And Eugen really needs to look at light infantry in general. I don't think they're a very good value. I think light infantry also across the board need to be shocked, not just like Deschutes. Scrolling down, we talked about regular motor shoots, and they have the crappy RPG, crappy RPK machine gun. Yeah. Panzerjäger, 5-man squad. I don't really like 5-man squads because they're so easy to kill with stray artillery or bombings. They get killed and suppressed really easily. And their AP's not even that good. It's only 17. In ALB this was adequate, but in Red Dragon it really isn't. Why are you bringing a dedicated tank hunter squad that can't even really harm heavy tanks? It just makes no sense. Reserve shoots and just reservist infantry, crappy stats, crappy armaments, only 10 men. Since reservists were nerfed to 10 men per squad, I don't feel they're really that great a value either. And Storm Pioneers, again, 5 men. They do have a very impressive napalm launcher, which fires quickly, 3 rounds, then has to reload. But again, 5 men, very easy to kill, very easy to suppress. I don't feel that the 5-men support squads are in a very good place now, and I don't feel they're very useful in any deck, frankly. There are some exceptions, like for example the Czech grenade launcher squad is alright. And this is probably the card everybody's been waiting me to come to, is the Watch Regiment. The problem with the Watch Regiment is they're extremely, and I mean extremely, underperforming, because they have this crappy machine gun which apparently was given to them because Eugen wants these guys to be available in era decks for God knows what reason. Nobody plays era. Don't worry about that, please, Eugen. They have at least a high rate of fire RPG, but relatively low AP. Submachine gun, which is basic submachine gun, 15-man card. But I have tests of this, 3 different videos testing Watch Regiment in different situations, along with the motor shoots, and I found that even in close-up forest combat, motor shoots in 90 actually perform as good or even better than Watch Regiment in a anti-infantry role, which is really what these guys should excel at. The only place these guys are better, I've found, is in actual CQC fighting, where you occupy the same building as an enemy, and the outline of the building turns purple and you start fighting, but I really don't find that to be a very common situation. I certainly don't go to cities that much, but when I do, the chance to get in CQC combat is relatively small. It's not something, I think it's something that happens more than something that happens all the time. And certainly in forest fighting that doesn't matter. So I don't feel the Watch Regiment's a very versatile card at all. Way too specialized if the only way they're better than the less expensive motor shoots in 90 is CQC fighting. And frankly, I didn't even find the 15-men squad to be that effective either. They still would die almost as quickly as motor shoots, and just because I think they're inflicting less damage on the enemy. I don't know. I would advise you to look at my tests. I might link them in the description, but I did test these guys pretty exhaustively, and I posted some of that onto YouTube. And I don't believe they've been buffed since then. Support. There's not really many options in DDR support. A lot of their different units are either very poorly performing, like the OSA series. Its only advantage is its wield. Other than that, it's extremely underwhelming. The Cub has always been one of the most maligned and most hated AA units in the game for its sheer suckiness. Strela 1, no, crappy AP, crappy accuracy, only 4 missiles. Fasta 4 used to be the favored AA unit of DDR and ALB, but they reduced its HE to 3, so now it's become, frankly, quite useless. No use at all, too weak. And most of the lower end tube artillery is kind of universally bad. The rocket artillery isn't all that great. Even they gave the DDR a Uragan, but without the HE, they gave it this really low AP, 5 AP, 16 rockets. It's like, really, this thing's not very good. This is another thing I tested on my YouTube channel, and the Uragan with HE is just so much better, and I wish they would change this AP to HE, just like the Soviet one. So of course that leads me to take really the only two good artillery choices, the Mista. This is the DDR designation of the Mista. You see it's got relatively long range, relatively good dispersion, fires in 7 or 8 seconds, whatever they have the advanced fire control systems firing at now. So this will fire much faster than any of these other artillery pieces and fire more accurately in general. Very solid long-range artillery. Tansha is my mortar. Again, very solid mortar. Good range, good HE, not as fast as other mortars, but decent. And I guess I need to cover AA. I have the Strela 10M. Very general purpose, very reliable, Red 4 AA. I actually, if you notice, it's 50 points, and it's got a good substitute in the FLA SFL 23-4-M, which is basically the East German hvAcza. And they have a lot of equivalency, a lot of roll overlap. I tried the hvAcza, and the only problem is for 50 points, and you have to micro its seed off, or I should say its radar off to avoid seed. It was just too much of a liability, though I did really like it. I couldn't have 4 AA units with radar. It just wasn't working for me. I was losing too much to seed missiles because it was too hard to try and micro everything on and off. Or on the other hand, these guys would be off because I couldn't micro them on quick enough when I was also trying to turn my Tunguskas on. So I went for the Strela 10M, much less vulnerable to seed, generally very reliable. I also take the East German Tunguska. You can see East Germany has their own designation for everything rather than just calling it the Tunguska. This is actually the earlier model of the Tunguska, so its infrared missile isn't as long range, isn't as good, but its gun is still just as good. Very solid AA unit, very worth the price in my opinion. The Tor I also have. You might remember in my USSR video I kind of bagged on the Tor, and I still think it's not that great a unit, but certainly in the East German deck it's pretty much the longest range, best anti-plane AA you have. Relatively reliable, and since you have the lesser Tunguska in your deck, the Tor is actually better at anti-helicopter roll, so it's not a bad value. Definitely worth it in a DDR deck, though I wouldn't take it in a USSR deck. Tanks, this is pretty self-explanatory. The T-72S, again, you can kind of see the results of Custard's DDR reskins, so maybe just go through them very quickly so you can see. It's basically the same camo pattern of that silver, black, and green for the most part, and it looks really nice. It's a variation of each. The pattern is a little different each time, but I like the uniformity this offers. I take the T-72S just because it has a 20 AP gun and has a really good missile, and it's kind of like, I'm very sad the DDR doesn't have a heavy tank, but the T-72S is just enough where you can, if you're smart, play with the enemy heavy tanks and really engage them and overwhelm them with numbers, if not anything else. Relatively well priced. I'd probably ask it be 5 points less, but maybe even 10 points. But anyways, generally a solid tank. It's definitely the main battle tank of the DDR. You see, you can get the T-72S1 for 5 points less. It's the exact same tank except no missile, that's a really good missile. I think this tank should be 130, 125 points, and this one more like 115, 120. And this isn't a very worthwhile card, the S1, because you lose the missile for only 5 points, and I already have enough T-72Ss. You could have this if you wanted more of your, quote, heavy tank. I could understand that, but I personally don't need it. I take the T-72M1 instead, which is actually a really high AP tank for its class, and it allows you to, certainly in situations where the DDR does best, which is kind of close to mid-range engagements, a lot of D-Day in Paradise is probably a really great map for the DDR. Certainly on the side that's more open on the one edge of the canal rather than the mountainside in D-Day in Paradise. You have enough AP here to really hurt enemy heavy tanks and punish them. Very good pocket heavy in some cases, in some ways. And I also take the T-72M. It's pretty analogous to the T-72A in my USSR deck, though it's a little less armored, I believe, is the only difference for the same price. But in terms of forest fighting value, it's very good. It's got 4 HE, which is what matters against infantry. So T-72S has 4 HE, the T-72M has 4 HE, so they'll literally be the same at dealing with infantry in forests. So if you're going to fight an infantry horde, you might as well bring the T-72Ms. Generally a good bulk tank to add numbers to your force as well. I will say I don't use it as much as the M1 or the S, but I do like having it. I might actually post a replay of me on D-Day in Paradise a little earlier today, which I think would show how I use my tanks. And then I have my Recon. I have Kampfschwimmer, which is a 2-point, very nice Recon squad. Decent RPG for a Recon squad, actually. It's got a sniper rifle, SMG. Generally, I mean, use them to go look at stuff. Very good infiltration. They have exceptional stealth. I like them. You see, there's the only really alternative for Recon infantry is the Grenzer, which you can get for only 15 points. Very good optics, very cheap. You can just sprinkle them around everywhere, no problem. I do have kind of a problem with this unit, the Special auf Klar, which is just these shock 5-man Recon squads really aren't very good. They should be 10 men. They should be kind of like a pseudo infantry card, just like elite Recon infantry tends to be, like the Spetsnaz VMF, for example, but they're not, and for 5 more points, you'll get a lot more use out of the Kampfschwimmer, so I take them. I also take basically a BMP-1 Recon vehicle, which you might remember I also have it in my USSR deck. Just exceptional optics, very good for looking at stuff, can support a tank push because it's armored and as fast as your tanks rather than faster or slower. There are some light APC options which don't have as good of optics, though they are faster. I personally don't really like them very much. And of course a Recon tank, but I don't think the Recon T-55s are all that good just because they only have good optics. They don't have a good gun. They aren't that well armored. I don't personally see the point of this, though you do see a lot of high-level players taking the T-55. Recon helicopters, there's only 2 options. I do take them both. This for the cheap Recon and this for the exceptional optics. Kind of experimenting there. I could take one or the other. I might take one card out, but for now I don't really have anywhere else to put the points, so here I am with these 2. Generally, they're both pretty good value for what they do. Vehicles, you'll see I have the flame tank. I did allude to this in my USSR video, in that I take flame tanks in my Eastern Bloc decks, and here you are. Very nice being able to put down flame on a target without risking a napalm bomber or something. Generally great for protecting infantry assault into a city, supporting them, and forests as well. There are other cards here I could take, like the Conquerors, but again, I just don't think the Conquerors is very reliable. It's only 45% accuracy. Its AP was high in ALB, but now it's kind of on the low scale of powerful ATGMs. It's not going to do more than 1 damage to an enemy super heavy, which is really what you want an ATGM to try and counter for you, because that's the one thing your tanks will have trouble dealing with. So I don't feel this is a very good value, frankly. Another option is this vehicle. It's basically a 57mm flak gun that's been adapted for fire support role. It is relatively well armored, 5 armor. It's got a powerful gun, 2 HE, which balances out the low rate of fire. It does have armor-piercing capabilities, which allows it to fight vehicles and forests as well. This wouldn't be a bad option. I do like this, but I just don't feel it's vital enough to make room for it in my deck. Helicopters, some very easy options. You got the Mi-24P. Oh, let me start over. The DHS Mi-24P and the KHS Mi-24P. You see the DHS has Conquerors M, which are actually worthwhile. Good accuracy, higher AP power Conquerors. It's Cocon M, excuse me, I said Conquerors M. It's got the Molnia Sidewinders, which are basically the wingtip mounted missiles on some earlier airplanes that they've adapted for Heinz. And they're not all that great. They're only 50% accuracy, which means statistically speaking, you're only really likely to hit 2 of them. You need at least 2 to kill almost any targets, so I don't think anti-air helicopters are really that well thought out by Eugen. Most of them aren't very effective, but this one, it's almost in my deck just for the more powerful missile for tank busting. It does have the autocannon, but as you can see here on the side, it's mounted on the hull of the helicopter rather than on a ball mount like with the USSR helicopters, so your helicopter has to actually be facing its nose right at its target to shoot, and that is pretty inconvenient. It does really limit the use of this helicopter. You see the KHS has the same problem. It's got the same side-mounted gun. It does have a weaker Cocon, and it trades the anti-air missiles for a bunch of powerful rockets, so decent fire support. As you can see, both of these only carry 4 missiles as opposed to the regular 8 that most Heinz carry. I really wish they'd change that and just give the DDR regular Hind rather than this. I don't understand why they couldn't mount 2 missiles on each more wing pylon, but it is what it is, I guess. Generally, these aren't the best helicopters, but they are relatively solid. They're armored, 10 HP, very fast. They can certainly do in a pinch, but they're not optimal, and it's one thing you'd say about the DDR tech. A lot of the stuff isn't optimal, but it is a minor nation, I suppose. Aircraft. This actually, you'll see I have a lot of pretty skins for my planes. This is actually using Vasto's DDR plane reskin pack, and I'll have that linked as well, because it's a very, look at, these are very high quality, very nice plane skins. They have a lot of new unit card pictures for them as well. Our planes, I take the MiG-29, very decent I want to say this, I don't want to say mid-range, but mid-quality ASF, air superiority fighter. It only has 2 Vimple AMRAAMs, unfortunately, but it's good enough. Relatively high ECM. You can see actually I take a MiG-23 ML as a kind of backup ASF. This is important because otherwise the DDR anti-air net's a little weak. It doesn't have the long-range book type weapons to really punish enemy bombers, and it's part of why I have this, just to support my MiG-29s. It does add a lot. I take them 2 elite. You can take 4 train, 2 elite. I take 2 elite. These long-range semi-active missiles will hit relatively often at elite. They do have the sidewinders to finish targets off, so they're really good at just picking off bombers and stuff going at your lines, or helping a MiG-29 tackle a more expensive enemy ASF. MiG-25, again, pretty self-explanatory. It's just the new bomber added in the DLC. It's got 8 15 HE bombs, 500 kilograms, pretty good ECM. It's very fast, just very reliable bomber. I do tend to escort it with Seed, which I'll get to at the end there. DDR ATGM plane is it's slow, it's got low ECM, it's only got 2 missiles and they're semi-active, so this, again, it's not optimal. They are 30 AP missiles though, so they will do a fair amount of damage, but you really have to baby this unit and try and get it to come at the side of an enemy tank, and then also hope it evacs smartly or just doesn't run into enemy AA on the way, because as soon as it starts getting hit, it's going to miss its missile. And I really wish they would have given this a better missile in the DLC, preferably a fire and forget one, but they didn't, and we won't get it, so this is the best you can do, and you can certainly make it work. I try to, but you have to be really careful with this. It's no Horn, it's no Su-27M. And finally, I have the Seed plane. DDR Seed plane is actually pretty decent. It's got only 2 missiles, but they are long range. Compared to the Polish one, they're actually 700 meters longer in range. Pretty good accuracy. Only midline ECM for a Seed plane, so really use this one With seedplanes, if you have a seedplane with higher ECM, like say 50% or so, you actually send it in front of your bombers to um, absorb hits for them. Hopefully, your seed won't get hit. Their high ECM will balance out the enemy's missiles and protect your bombers and ATGM planes. With this one, I feel the opposite's kind of true. Its missiles are long enough that you want your bombers more in front, or at least with your seed planes, so that the seed missiles have a chance to hit the enemy. They're long range enough to protect your bombers from most radar AA assets. Now, certainly Patriot and iHawk PIP 3s, maybe not quite so much, but generally good use, reliable seed aircraft. And that's pretty much all I have for DDR planes. I think a lot of people use the laser, but I don't see its value over the 23ML personally. A lot of these other planes, they're just too old, too slow, too low ECM to really have a good impact on the game. Cheap napalm bomber, 70 points for only 2 napalm bombs. Really? No 10% ECM. 75-point throwaway rocket plane. I think these 5 are really the only viable DDR planes, at least in my mind. You can see actually the biggest difference between this deck and my other ones in terms of activation points is a 5th plane card. And to take that, because I really want this second ASF, I had to take out a supply chopper, and I also had to get rid of a vehicle card. Had it not been for this, or if you can get away with reducing one of these 5 cards, you could definitely add in the supply helicopter. You could definitely maybe get another tank instead if you want maybe a T-72S1, or just another vehicle. Anyways, like I said, the DDR deck definitely has a lot of issues. I think it can be improved quite a bit. We won't see any new units for it, unfortunately. That just will not happen, but we can certainly argue for changes like infantry pricing rebalancing and transport rebalancing and lower costs for other units, maybe even a new missile loadout for the ATGM plane, like I said. But generally, they're a very fun, very flavorful nation, very unique in a lot of ways. I've always enjoyed them. They're my glorious socialist nation, and I definitely recommend you at least try them out and see what you think. And I think they're a more worthwhile nation to play than most people would think at a glance. So anyways, I really hope you enjoyed my video. Please remember to comment, like, and subscribe, and leave feedback on how you think the video was and how to improve, or maybe other things you thought I should have talked about but really didn't. But I think that's about all I have for today. So again, thanks for watching. This is Raven signing off.